Do you believe that martial law is the only way to stop terrorism in our country?
Uh, Not really, but I think martial law uh, will be more effective in dealing terrorism and rebellion in the country. Because without it, uh, it will take maybe a decade or two, and still the problem will still exist because the problem is you're fighting with your own the same color. They look like us, they act like us, they talk like us. So which is a lot harder to distinguish or to know the enemy, in other words, to identify them. It's a lot harder. So you need to have the martial law on your side in order to implement and the rules and the policies that you have to use and try to squeeze uh, the the places where they can move around, try to isolate them so you can finish them off. Now the problem with that is without the martial law, the things that the military can do will be just very minimal and very limited in trying to control these elements. But with the martial law in place, it will help the military a lot and the government to do what they're supposed to do in order to defeat uh, these bad elements in the country.
If you were to decide whether to extend martial law in Mindanao until 2022, would you say yes?
I would say uh, with what is going on right now, I would say yes. Because after the Marawi incident, uh, if let's say the military will be able to finish the war in Marawi, there is still another group that they have to contend with, which is the NPA. And I think fighting the NPA is a lot. It will take a lot longer than the Maotis, for the reason that NPA is nationwide, while the Maotis were just isolated in Marawi. So, which means it will take longer time uh, to get the job done in trying to deal with the NPAs. And that is the reason why I believe that the martial law is needed to be extended all the way to 2022. And in fact, I believe that
If you were President Marcos at that time, would you implement martial law? Why or why not?
uh, no, I don't think so. If I was the president at that time, because I don't think there is a need for it. See, the only reason why Marcos imposed martial law at that time, it's because it was the only way he can stay in power. Okay, he doesn't want to relinquish the post, so he declared martial law to stay in power. And the the chaotic situation, which they used as a reason to implement martial law, was also created by the government. It was an artificial situation created by the government for them to show the people that they have a reason to implement martial law. But you know, the reality is there was no need for it.
Thank you. Don't inform them.
Naiiyak ako.
If you were to decide whether to extend martial law in Mindanao until the year 2022, would you say yes, why, or why not?
I think I'm fine with martial law, but extending it until 2022 is too much, a little bit too much. So they can probably extend it only until next year, perhaps, until the war is over, especially in Marawi, but not until 2022.
Second, do you believe that martial law is the only way to stop terrorism in our country?
Not really. I think it's one of the good ways to stop terrorism, but it's not the only way. Although I'm not sure of the other ways wherein you can stop terrorism, but I think martial law really is an effective way, but not the only way.
Last, if you were President Marcos at that time, would you implement martial law? Why or why not?
Maybe. I think I will. If I was him, I think I will implement martial law. But if I were him as well, I wouldn't really implement it in that imposing way. Because I think his reasons were at first understandable and really has the basis to implement martial law. But later on in the duration of martial law, he really overused the power of it and how martial law should have been. So I think I might implement it, but not the way that he did.
Thank you, Miss. If you were to decide whether to extend martial law in Mindanao until year 2022, would you say yes, why, or why not?
Um, if I were to decide, I am not in favor of extending the martial law until 2022 because I believe that it is already too long for the present Marawi crisis, and I have a big trust with our government's effort that they will be able to put an end to these terror groups.
Second, do you believe that martial law is the only way to stop terrorism in our country?
Declaring martial law is the president's prerogative if it is really the best solution to stop the terrorism. But personally, I believe that there's still other way like state of emergency. Other countries already experienced terrorism, but they didn't declare martial law. So, but at the end, it's still the president's prerogative.
Last, if you were President Marcos at that time, would you implement martial law? Why or why not?
If I were President Marcos, I think I will declare martial law at that time. Rebellion was very rampant anywhere in the country. The communist group, the NPA's number was growing rapidly, especially when Marcos discovered the MV Karagatan, which is the ship that was loaded with guns and ammunitions from China in support to the communist group, to the NPAs. So I think it is a big threat to the sovereignty of the country. So I believe martial law is the best solution I can come up with if I am the president to end that threat, because I think it was really a big threat to our what we call our independence or our freedom. So that's it.
Thank you.
Until I think for now martial law is okay, but if it is extended for a long time, I think it is not really reasonable for us. And as long as the police won't be abusive of the law of martial law, I think it is okay for our safety as well.
So, for me, there's nothing wrong about the martial law that's happening here in Mindanao, because for me, martial law today and martial law during the Marcos regime is quite different. During Marcos, there are allegedly and also proven police brutality actions. But I think for now, it is based on the constitution, because there is an uprising terrorism attack. And I think that's reasonable enough to declare martial law. And the question that if I am in favor of extending martial law till year 2022, I'm not in favor with it because it will affect our economy. Will be all. Thank you.
I think we are safe under Duterte's hand and won't be abused of the powers from martial law.
There's this man's photo on the wall of my father's office at home. You know, where father brings his work, where he doesn't look strange still wearing his green uniform and colored breastplates. Where, to prove that he works hard, he also brought a photo of his boss whom he calls Apo. So Apo could, hang around on the wall behind him and look over his shoulders to make sure he's snappy and all. Father snapped at me once, caught me sneaking around his office at home, looking at the stuff on his wall, handguns, plaques, a sword, medals, a rifle, told me that was no place for a boy, only men. When he didn't really have to tell me because, that photo of Apo on the wall was already looking at me while I move around, his eyes following me like he was that scary Jesus in the hallway, saying, I know what you're doing.